One of Google's newest ranking factors, rolling out in 2021, is Core Web Vitals. Core Web Vitals looks at 3 different metrics that try to analyze and understand something about your website's user experience. Let's talk about one of those metrics in this video today, First Input Delay, or FID. Let's begin by talking about what First Input Delay even is. Google's definition is that First Input Delay is the time it takes from when a user first interacts with your page, that is, when they clicked on a link, tapped on a button, did something to interact with your web page, how long it takes from when the user first interacts to the time when the browser is able to respond to that interaction. We can think of FID as measuring how quickly the website can be interacted with by a visitor. So if somebody comes to your website, how quickly does your website let that person interact? So the real key question to address here is if the website responds to an interaction, like a click or a tap, in under 100 milliseconds. Poor FID is caused by excessive main thread work. The main thread of your website can be thought of like a line at a store. If you're the 25th person in line, you're going to be waiting a while. If you're only the second person in line, you're not going to be waiting quite as long. And so that line on your website, or the thread on your website, if it's full of a lot of other requests, and then your user comes along and tries to click on a link, well, now they're the last person in that line, and they're potentially going to be waiting a while. On a website, that main thread can be full of lots of requests from third-party scripts, that could be tracking scripts, advertisements, whatever it is, large JavaScript files that you have on your own website. They're trying to execute stuff and create cool and interesting and fancy functionality on your website. And the main thread can also just be full of too many other HTTP requests. If you have 100 items that are trying to load into your website, and then your user comes along while those 100 items are trying to load and clicks on a link or taps on a button, now they're at number 101 in the queue. And they're going to be waiting a while for your website to respond to their request. So as you think about your FID scores and wanting to improve this, you want to make sure that you're making your website more idle, reducing how busy your website is, so that way your website can respond more quickly when people try to interact with it. There are 3 different categories for FID measurements. There's good, needs improvement, and poor. Good means that your website is responding to people's interactions within 100 milliseconds. The middle category of needs improvement means that your website is responding in more than 100 milliseconds, but less than 300 milliseconds. And then finally, there's poor, where your website takes longer than 300 milliseconds to respond. The 100 millisecond timing might seem ridiculously fast, but it is not arbitrary. At 100 milliseconds, something feels instantaneous. We don't even notice that there was any kind of delay at 100 milliseconds. Between 100 milliseconds to 300 milliseconds, our brains do start to perceive that there was a little bit of a lag. There was a little bit of a delay happening there. After 300 seconds, we really do start to notice the delay, and things start to feel slower, even at a subconscious level. So by making your website respond to people's interactions in less than 100 milliseconds, your website will feel instantaneous. It will feel that much faster. It'll be that much better for people when they're using your website. Now, one question that will come up as you think about FID is, what if people don't interact with my website? Because some people who visit your website won't interact with it at all. Of course, it's not just people who don't interact, right? There are different ways that people can interact with your website. Some people are going to try and interact with your website when it's really busy, when your website is trying to load a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's going to result in a much higher FID. On the other hand, you're going to have some people who come to your website at the best possible time. Your website is idle, it's not trying to load anything else, and that's when somebody clicks on a link or taps on a button. And in that state, you're going to get a lower FID because your website is going to be able to respond right away. So because of all of these differences in how people interact, Google aggregates the FID scores across everybody who's visiting your website. And they're wanting about 75% of visitors to have a good value for FID. So you don't need to aim for everybody to have an FID of less than 100 milliseconds. You want to aim for 75% of your visitors to have an FID of less than 100 milliseconds. That does present a problem, though, when it comes time to measuring FID. FID can't be measured in a lab because it needs to measure actual interactions requested by actual people visiting your website. You can't replicate that in a lab setting. So as an alternative, lab tests can measure a similar metric of total blocking time. Total blocking time is definitely different than first input delay, but they both kind of get at the same idea, and optimizing FID also optimizes total blocking time. So with that in mind, let's talk about how we know if we have an FID issue. How do we measure this? There are a few different tools out there that you can use to measure FID and total blocking time. We have PageSpeed Insights, which measures both FID and total blocking time. We have Google Search Console's Core Web Vitals report, which measures FID only, and then we have WEBPAGE Test, which measures total blocking time only. Let's begin in PageSpeed Insights. If you want more details about using PageSpeed Insights, we did a whole other video all about PSI. You can check that out to learn all the ins and outs of using this tool. For now, I'll just simply say that you can go to PageSpeed Insights and put in the URL that you're wanting to measure. From there, you can see lots of different metrics, including the first input delay. Zooming in on FID, we can see that you're not only told the FID measurement, in this case 61 milliseconds, but we can see a distribution graph. The distribution graph tells us what percentage of people had a good, needs improvement, or poor FID when loading our website. In this case, 81% of people had a good FID score, so this page is well optimized for FID. 9% of people had a needs improvement FID score, and 10% of people had a poor FID score. In PageSpeed Insights, you can also see total blocking time. This is located under the lab data. Next, we have Google Search Console's Core Web Vitals report. If you're not familiar with Google Search Console's Core Web Vitals report, we did a whole other video looking at all the details of that. For now, I'll just focus on FID. After you click on Core Web Vitals, you can go to either mobile or desktop problems, and then from here you can see if you have FID issues. If you do have FID issues on either device, you can click on that to view which pages are having a problem. And finally, we can look at total blocking time in WEBPAGE Test. Now, if you're not familiar with WEBPAGE Test, we did a whole other video looking at all the details of how you use WEBPAGE Test to measure not only total blocking time, but a lot of other metrics as well. Once you run the WEBPAGE Test report, under the Performance Results table, you will see total blocking time. In this case, we have a poor total blocking time, which would indicate we would likely also have a poor FID score, and we need to do some work to optimize our website. All right, we've covered a lot of ground here about FID, but what I really want you to take away from this video is making sure that your website can respond to users' interactions in 100 milliseconds or less. And that's especially important on the first interaction. So the very first way in which people interact with your website, the first time they click on a link or they click on a button on your website, we want that to respond in 100 milliseconds or less. That way your website really feels fast and you're making a good first impression for the people visiting your website. For more details or more technical explanation about FID, you can check out these resources from Google and web.dev. If you have any questions about Core Web Vitals, FID, or other technical SEO subject matter, please let me know. You can email me at matthew@elementive.com. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it from Elementive, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.